dude is classy. He got good vocabulary. He looks good, you know.
I didn't say that per se, but no.
I'm assuming you were thinking that, though.
But no, there's never a perfect time, right? For like when you make big leaps, and I think sometimes you just have to be opportunistic, and when things present themselves,
right, you
gotta react. So it is what it is.
And we gotta at least dig in and find out more information about it, so that we can make an educated decision of, hey, let's go forward with this or let's not.
For sure.
So, I don't know. It'll be good. One thing we do need to do, though, as we're going through and doing businesses, and this is something that I'm working on pretty hard, and I think you're working on too, but we have to get really good at saying no.
Yeah.
Because there are always going to be a lot of opportunities to come, and we need to figure out and sift through which ones are going to take us from here to where we need to be over the next short term and long term. And we need to think about both of those at all times so that we can really get to where we want to be. Because lots of things, it's like, this is going to be great short term, but it might totally screw up stuff for long-term stuff.
Yeah.
So anyways, we'll kind of be figuring all that kind of stuff out. Dude, we've been getting a crap ton of snow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I went last night. I went skiing last night, and it was a warmer day.
Is it still pretty decent snow, or did it get kind of crusty?
No, so it warmed up and kind of softened it.
Yeah, but then cooled down.
But then it cooled down. Right?
Yeah.
And the snow was fast.
Oh, nice.
It was fast. It was really fun. So I got my lessons that I teach, I got them to go down at Nordic. There's one green run that goes down the whole thing. Mm-hmm. It took us the whole 2 hours to get down it. Like, that's how slow. And so, but I used that phrase that Matt said, trust the speed.
Trust the speed.
And so I tell him to try to trust the speed, and like, it's okay to go down, and like, you're going to have real estate that's going to flatten out, so you can go fast. Because if you go slow and then you make it to all that real estate, you're going to be walking.
Yeah.
So like, use that momentum to get through that flat stuff. So trust the speed.
Trust the speed. It's funny, something that Matt had mentioned. We're talking about Matt Frisbee, but something that Matt had mentioned is he was the one that was kind of causing himself to crash a ton. He was on the snowboard, and it was because he was kind of a little bit flat. And it's interesting, I think lots of times in life we get kind of nervous about something, and it's just like mountain biking or anything. If you're mountain biking, you're not looking at the rocks you're not trying to hit, because where you're looking is where you're going to go. And so kind of the same thing, like if you trust the speed, I don't know, like that's when you get hurt doing jumps or anything. Like, you're in the middle of a backflip and you see people freeze and land on their head. It's because they're thinking about it too much, and they're not like just trusting it.
Right.
They're worried about the crashing and the burning, and then that's what they end up doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
nice. When are you getting back up there?
So this weekend I'm gonna be going to the Salt Lake Resort. So when I have my kids, I go to Nordic and I take them, and we have this little follow the leader little group with me and
Nice.
4 kids following me around.
Heck yeah.
And then on the weekends I don't have my kids. Me and my wife, we go to the big Salt Lake resorts, and
because you got the Icon Pass.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep, and go explore. So
yeah, sweet. I don't know when I'm going again. I need to plan it. It's Friday, so.
Well, have you noticed when you drive over the pass, North Ogden Divide, there's tracks everywhere. People are backcountry skiing everywhere.
Yeah, you were telling me. I actually haven't been skinning in a few weeks. I need to get up there.
Yeah.
I should go tomorrow morning.
And then
I'm gonna go tomorrow morning.
There's a lot of skydivers that are strapping their skis on, and they're skiing down with their parachutes.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
It's pretty cool.
That's cool. They do a lot of that down like Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Dude, I want to do that. Anyways,
yeah.
My wife would kill me. If I started doing that, then I'd probably start getting into base jumping.
Yeah. Well, I haven't thought about just kite surfing, on the snow.
Yeah. That's kind of what it is. So I've actually done that. They did some competitions up at the top of Powder, and they did it so you go out Hidden Lake and you keep going out, and it's all the flats where they've started to develop now. But they did that like way back in the day. So Shannon Best, do you know Shannon Best? So do you know the S Bend?
Yes.
Wakeboarding?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So it's named after Shannon Best.
Yes.
And so that's Best Kites. Anyways, met him up there. It's kind of funny because we should probably get into this pretty soon, but side story. So met him up there. We hung out a couple times, and I wasn't thinking, but I don't drink. And he's like, dude, we have a St. Patty's Day party down at this place down in Salt Lake. Like, you should come and hang out with us. And I was like, yes. I get down there, and they're like trying to hand me drinks. and I wasn't thinking, obviously that's a lot of what you do
That's what
for
you
St.
do.
Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
It's drink. And I know that, but I just wasn't thinking. I was just like, dude, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to go hang out with Shannon. And anyways, it's going to be a good time. But I was there for like an hour, and they're like, we're going to go hit some bars, so we'll see you later.
We'll see you later.
It was just funny.
Yeah.
But anyways, good dude.
Yeah. Sweet.
So anyways, dude, today we should probably jump into the podcast. So we have Brett Greenwell with us. So I've known Greenwell since I was 5. So my dad was in the military. We moved here from Louisiana. We moved a couple different places. We moved here and just down the street, a couple houses down from Brett. And so knew him there for, 2.5 years. And then we moved to Georgia. Mm-hmm. And then it was like 3 years in Georgia. But we were on a temporary deployment, is what it's called, for the military. And so we knew we were moving back, so my parents didn't sell the house. So they just kept it and rented it out. And so I remember we were coming back, and Georgia was awesome. Loved it, had a lot of good friends. And it's kind of hard when you're moving, especially when you're a kid. I was in elementary school at the time, and we were leaving, but there were a couple things I was really stoked about. Mountains and skiing. And then I also knew that I was going to be right down the street from Greenwell again. And so it was like, yeah, it was just cool. It was like, all right, leaving some best friends there, but then had some best friends here. It made it so that it was like, it was a good trip. 3 days we drove across the country back here from Georgia. But kind of stoked the whole time rather than like, I don't know how that's going to be, nervous, whatever. Kind of helps to have that. So anyways, came back. It's funny, I was thinking, I was talking to Greenwell a little bit before, and he just started laughing. He's like, where did you pull this from?
This bio is incredible.
Yeah.
And I could not have ever come up with any of this stuff by myself. But going back to that, I remember you like strolling on up in this sweet Ford, like cream and burgundy van, I want to say.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was like the first van I'd ever seen that had captain's chairs. And I was like, what is this upgraded like piece of machinery?
Yeah.
And
the
literally,
middle chairs, so they were like the front seats, and the seats right behind them were
Yeah.
captain's chairs. Like
I remember that like pulling on up and like all you guys moving all your stuff, and it was literally like the day you like moved there and you like walked up the street, and we had like our little neighborhood crew, and he was like, hey, and I was like, oh, what's up, Jordan? And it was just like that, like he was back, like 3 years, no time wasted, just like.
And when you're little kids, that's a long time.
That's an eternity, but
Yeah.
I just remember it was like, hey, he's back, cool. And we had a couple of people that kind of got to do that. We had a friend, Blake Terry, that like went to Mexico for a couple of years, and all of a sudden he came back, and it's like, oh, hey.
Yep. Yeah.
The
That was
van.
good.
I just remember the van.
Dude, the van, we have a lot of family in California, and so we'd always go down to Cali, and back then you didn't always have to have seatbelts like you do now. And so
Laws were just guidelines.
yeah.
They were
Yeah,
just
just guidelines.
suggestions.
Right in the back of a truck on a road trip is like normal.
Totally.
Or,
yeah, the far back of that van like folded down into like a full bed, if that makes sense. So, like behind the last seat, it was actually like a cushion, and so it slid down, so it was like a big old bed. So we would fold it into a bed and turn those chairs around. And so the only two people that were actually in seatbelts were like the driver and the person up in shotgun. But
Totally safe. Totally
safe.
Department of Transportation approved.
I mean, we're all still around, so I don't
I
know.
don't think it's because of that. I think it's in spite of that. That's fine. Yeah.
But a little bit more about Greenwell.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so these are some of the things that I was like, I haven't thought about in forever, but I was like, if I'm going to introduce them, I'm going to kind of like go back. Like, Greenwell's always been involved in sports and that kind of stuff. I remember as we were growing up, he kind of said he wanted to be like a sports agent. And I think he's a lot closer to his dream than most people when they have a dream when they're a kid and they grow up. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I still remember I was on a baseball team, and I think it was the Cardinals or the Padres. It was just like, okay, cool, like, MLB name. Brett was playing for the Bad Boys.
Shout out to Randy Chambers. Best coach in the world.
But there could have been a movie made about it because they like dominated everybody. It wasn't like they just won games. They had like batting practice like at his house.
He had a batting cage in his backyard.
Yeah.
So we would have practice, and he had a batting cage.
It was seriously like they rolled up and were like using borrowed mitts and stuff, and they're like in full decked out uniforms. Like,
I mean, it's not like we were sponsored or anything like that. We had a good team. Like we
they
lost
had a really good team.
We lost like 3 games in like 5 years or something like that. Like we had a good team.
I think you're being humble. It probably wasn't even that many.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, but it's kids ball, right? So you're just like, whatever, we're out here to play and have fun.
T-ball? Hitting off the tee?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, T-ball, coach pitch all the way through. We had a really good pitcher.
Well, I think you guys had the same team like for
and then we had
years.
Consistency. Yeah, we just had the same people. So like,
and they were really smart, and they didn't let bad players on the team. Like I kept on trying to be on the team. And
yeah,
like,
I was on the team, right, man? So like, obviously you didn't have to try out or anything, but no. And the cool thing was like our head coach, his son was on our team. Probably the biggest jokester of all. He was a great athlete. His biggest goal every game was like, how do I get dirty? So he slid into home every game just to get dirty. Like his mom's a saint. Did more laundry probably than anyone I've ever met. But like our practices, half the time they were about fielding and hitting. But he taught us a lot about how to be just good kids and how to respect our parents and be good teammates and good friends. So honestly, when I go and talk about like mentors in my life and people I look up to and who's taught me about leadership, like the coach, Randy Chambers, is a name that comes up frequently because I saw him lose his temper one time in however many years I played, and he was awesome.
Dang. Yeah, it's funny. I had that written down, and Greenwell's like,
a bad boy. I was like, where are you finding this? What Wikipedia page is out there?
Yeah. Yeah. Part of the reason we have Greenwell here, one, because he's a good friend, but also we're always looking for people that are drifting from tradition and doing things a little bit different. And because they're doing that, they're finding success in life and in business. And so we're going to talk just a little bit. Greenwell, he started working for America First Credit Union in college, I believe. Is that?
Yeah, right before college.
Right before college.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was thinking, this is how I'm going to get close to sports, like going to work for a credit union, right? But the credit union that he works for, it's nationally known. Here in Utah, it's obviously a behemoth. It's huge. Everybody knows it. But with some other work stuff, I've actually had the opportunity to work with a lot of different credit unions. And around the country, they know who America First is. Partly because it's a smaller market and they're so huge. They're so big, I wrote down just a little. They have 130 locations. That might be accurate.
It's changed post-COVID. We're down to like 120. We've done some consolidation, but we'll be right back up there.
Yeah, they're the 9th largest credit union in assets in the U.S. That's probably somewhere top 10 always. I saw something where it was 8th, something 9th. Anyways, huge with over $11.5 billion in assets, over 1 million members, which if you don't know like the financial world, it's actually really big for credit unions. Lots of credit unions are kind of like, okay, it's a school district or there's different credit unions. Often they're kind of small. So America First is really big. So Greenwell started there as a teller, has worked his way all the way up through several different positions, director positions, manager positions. Now he's, what's your current title of, what do you have, like 4 different departments that you're over now?
So I'm the vice president of member and partner relations. So that's, we'll say 3.5 departments right now, depending on when this comes out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have 3 departments and then one that's in transition that'll come over. So
yeah. And we're going to be talking about some of those things because we did say this is kind of sports related. That's some of what I want to kind of talk to you about is some of that stuff. Some of what I know he's done there has kind of transformed the way that this credit union has done their corporate partnerships and those types of things. And so we'll talk a little bit about some of that. But Greenwell, we are happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
And it's very apparent that we are different, which is great because you guys are talking about like the slippery slope that you guys run of like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to like go into kiteboarding and I'm going to go into like base jumping. And I'm like, man, if I go tubing this weekend at the park, I might like be sore. And that's about all I have to be worried about. But no, yeah, like winter sports, you guys dominate there. So that's great. And I'm glad that you guys bring the excitement because me, I'm just like, yeah, that hill's pretty insane for my tube, for my lifetime sled. So
that can be more dangerous oftentimes.
Sure, no, yeah.
Or anything else.
Especially when I'm trying to show off for like my 11-year-old, right? It's like my dad still got it. Like I just turned 40, so I'm like trying to not show my age.
Yeah.
Which I think in turn shows my age more.
Yeah.
But it's fine.
It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. A little bit more intro for Greenwell.
Okay.
So I was just thinking about a couple firsts that I've had with Greenwell. So one of my first concerts ever was actually out at the fairgrounds with Greenwell. It was a band called Little Texas. Have you ever heard of Little Texas?
Oh, come on. Well known. for sure in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. No, they're probably not.
Yeah.
Tiny.
They're playing Weber County Fair. That
Like,
tells you.
is it an old band? Are they old?
They're like
they-
country.
Well, we just talked
80s
about
country.
our age. We're old.
Yeah, it's
so
like
Well, I'm saying, are they old before your time, or are they?
no,
like,
they're
new
like
during-
probably like late '80s, early '90s
Okay.
country.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, this podcast is going to make it to somebody that knows the band. And shout out to Little Texas.
Yeah, anybody in Little Texas, get a hold of us. Like,
Shout out to Little Texas.
yeah, that was awesome. Again, that was kind of my intro into the concerts, and I was like, okay, cool. And then, yeah, we've been to a few other concerts and other things, but really, one of the other things is my first video shoot. Really, like, Dude Perfect video shoot. Do you remember? Was there a commercial?
Yeah, we had like a high 8 video camera that like my dad used.
Like one of those that's like 50 pounds?
Yeah, it's like record us at Disneyland or whatever that I just confiscated and made my own. And when you look at like the little Tupperware of like tapes that we had, you know, there's like 3 of them that are like Yellowstone or California or whatever, and the rest are all like Brett's Friends Make Video Part 6. Like, and yeah, we would record ourselves making weird basketball shots or, I mean, we got pretty advanced to where we were like writing scripts about like, okay, and we'd do like multiple angle shots of, you know, like the MJ Larry Bird McDonald's commercial where they wanted to like bank stuff off everything. We're like, we could reshoot that. So it's like us throwing basketballs off signs and stuff. And
that's what I was just thinking. I remember
The
like the stop
angles-
sign that was like way over here.
and the angles were completely off, right? Like it's like bouncing this way in the one shot, and then it's off. Yeah, it was not great, but
But it was fun.
We won't win any Oscars, but it was.
Right.
I mean, what 8-year-old kids do you know that are like out there setting up cameras and like making videos? I mean, we're before our time. We could have been content creators, man. We could have been
Totally.
YouTubers, just
Right.
raking it in. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's also, I don't think Greenwell was involved in a lot of this stuff, but it's a good thing we didn't have social media and cameras when we got into like
100%.
high school.
100%.
Man,
Yeah.
we got away with a lot of stuff that we won't go over because
Yeah.
this is going to be posted publicly. But
I mean,
Yeah.
statute of limitations, I think, is up. But yeah, we definitely we were at the tail end of being able to get away with some stuff that my daughter just would not be able to.
Right.
yeah,
So that's fine.
we had some good times.
Yeah.
Time. Cool. So I guess before we jump in, anything you want to know about Greenwell?
No, I just when I first met you, we went to what was that restaurant called?
Tacos.
El Paisa.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my first. My buddy always told me to go to El Paisa because it's really good. And
Yeah.
when we said we were going there, and I just always remember like, this dude is classy. He got good vocabulary. He looks good, you know. And so then when we had our first meeting and we let you talk, I was like, dude, will you like read me bedtime stories at night? Like I could listen and learn from you so much. So
It's one of my side gigs.
It's pretty cool.
I read adults.
Reading grown men.
Yeah, adult.
Bedtime stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I did not know that about you. That's not in your bio.
Yeah.
yeah,
You need to update Wikipedia. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, thank you. That's very kind of you. Classy is probably not an adjective that gets thrown around a lot towards me, but I appreciate it. No, it's been great working with you guys, and obviously getting to know Abner in this context instead of us making weird videos as 8-year-olds
Yeah.
or whatever, going to sweet little Texas concerts. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, again, I was probably a weird kid. What 7-year-old's like? I want to be a sports agent. Like, I don't know. And I did weird stuff. One of my like earlier memories is going out to my cousin's house. I have one sibling. I have a sister, so I didn't have like any brothers. But I had a cousin that's a week younger than me.
Is that Brady?
Yeah, my cousin Brady. So
Yeah.
I would grow up. I kind of grew up out at their house quite a bit, and they put up with me a lot. And I remember, like, we would have basketball tournaments in their backyard, and we would like legit spray paint logos on this like cement court that they had, and
Yeah.
we would play dunk ball in the basement on like a Nerf hoop, and we would spend 2 hours setting it up, and I would be like taping with masking tape a Nike swoosh
Yep.
to get halfway done, like, oh, it doesn't look good, and I got to redo it. And so I was doing like all these weird things as a kid that, looking back on it now, it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of where my heart always was trying to get into like the marketing side of sports and everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, like career paths are, in my experience at least, are very rarely, linear, and it's making all these weird moves. And And yeah, the credit union space in America First has been great for me. It was a college job it was just supposed to get me through college as a 20-hour teller. And I tell people all the time, like, I just forgot to leave. Like 18 years later, I'm still here.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm the guy on Office Space, Milton, that they're just going to one day like forget, correct the error and make me work in the basement and not pay me.
Yeah.
And I would still show up. But yeah, I did a couple of different things, utilized the Spanish that I know and was able to do some cool stuff in like the lending world and move up and try some different things. But marketing was always where my heart was at. And so when I was getting close to my degree being wrapped up.
What did you get your degree in?
In business administration, bachelor's in business administration at Weber State.
Nice.
With an emphasis in marketing. And so I was getting ready to go work at an ad agency, or at least go interview with them, when a spot opened up at the marketing department at America First. And talking to the VP at the time, he's like, why don't you work here? Agencies get like hired and fired all the time, so you're doing really good, and then you'll like lose some clients. And
yeah,
he had owned his own agency, so he's like, it's just like this game. Here you have one client and you work for them and they'll never drop you, and it's just very stable. Just stay here.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So I did media buying and got to know like all the TV stations and radio stations and figure that out. And there was some turnover in the meantime, but they kind of asked me, like, we had a couple of sponsorships at the time where we paid a pretty good sum of money to put our logo up at places, and we signed an agreement. And we'd literally just like take the agreement and file it in a 3-ring binder and put it in like a bookshelf. And we would make our payments and they would send tickets over. And it was just, that was kind of the transaction. And nobody was really following up on it other than whenever that contract expired, 3-5 years, whatever, you might look at it and be like, oh, wait, we didn't get all this stuff. But I mean, after 5 years, you're letting a lot of value slip by. So I was just asked, hey, in your spare time, which I didn't really have any, like, can you help us revamp this and take a look at it? And I'm super grateful for my current boss, Tammy, who like kind of saw the vision and was like, hey, we'll assign you. And she gave me the opportunity. And that's what I tell a lot of people is, opportunity most times kind of disguises itself as hard work and extra work. And so it's always an inconvenience.
Yeah.
But if you can do it, and it's not always going to pay off every time. People are like, well, I did this extra assignment and nothing happened. It's like, well, something, right? You got experience or learn to say no next time or whatever. But
yeah,
luckily I said yes. And that led to this kind of becoming my job. And I got to create a department that just focused on the corporate partnerships. And we got to work with these great businesses. And the whole idea is just, how do we manage it? How do we get value out of it? A lot of stuff changes over 5 years. So if you sign this long-term deal, you're going to have to change and tweak and pivot halfway through. So how are you having these ongoing conversations to make sure that you can do that and not give up these, great assets that you bought, but like convert them into something else? And hopefully by the time you're up for renewal, it's better than it was when it started. So yeah, we've been able to do that and grow. And
well, something that kind of hit me as you were telling, because we've had conversations about this before in the past, but tossing it in a 3-ring binder, it was very much just a transactional thing where it was like, we give you money and then you go and do your thing. And so something you kind of mentioned was actually creating like deep, real relationships with these partners and seeing them as partners, not just an advertising avenue. Can you talk a little bit just about that? Like some of maybe the relationships you've had there, and like, because that changes things quite a bit, I think.
Yeah. Words have meaning, right? And so people a lot of times are like, oh, it's synonymous. You're saying this and it's the same thing. It's not. And words matter. And what you say to yourself and what you're calling them every day, I think changes your perspective and your attitude towards things. Yeah. That's why I believe in like having self-affirmations and what you say to yourself, even if it's internally. Like if you're constantly telling yourself you're a failure or you're doing these things wrong, sooner or later you're going to believe it. And we changed our mindset, and we stopped calling them sponsorships and we called them corporate partnerships. And we would tell them that, like, we don't refer to you as a sponsor, we refer to you as a partner. And that means it's a two-way relationship. So let's be real about this. What are we giving you, and what are our expectations, and what are you providing us, and what are your expectations? And we started asking questions that other people weren't. Like, what are your objectives? What are your goals? So that we can help you be successful. Not just like, hey, we did business together and I think it was fine. Like, how can we help you achieve your goals and do it at the same time and really be mutually beneficial? And I found that like the best strategies and advice are usually the simple ones, but it's just actually implementing them. And that's where I think a lot of people don't do that because it sounds overly simplistic. So they just don't do it. And we started doing that. And so it worked out great. I think we went from like 7 partners. We're at 52 right now.
Yeah.
So we've grown.
Okay.
Got a bigger team that has to manage it. We're in branches in 5 states: Idaho, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico. But we lend in 8.
Yeah.
And your research is great. But we've now grown from 11 up to 17 billion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's getting big.
Well, I think that's cool because it's like you guys aren't going to people say, hey, we're America first, we're the big dogs, you need us. It's more of a, hey, no, what are you, you're outward facing, you're saying, hey, what are you guys running into? How can we help? Type of thing. And that relationship is how you're able to grow because they're like, oh, these guys care. They're not just saying we're the top dogs.
Yeah, and it's all the same, analogies and things you've heard for years. It's people do business with other people they know, like, and trust. And so how do we humanize ourselves and not just be this big faceless organization, but be the neighborhood people? How does the branch manager that you see down the street, how do they get their face out there and become relevant in the community? But we've also talked about, how do we go from transactional? How do we show these people that we really care? And it's not just treating them like, a transaction or a robot or something, a means to an end, but treating them like humans and talking to them about how their day's been. And when they get married, sending them a wedding gift and saying thank you and going out of your way to do things. It's a game changer. And it sounds so simple, but when you employ it in the right way and you can be authentic about it, I think people feel that, and that's what resonates. So,
well, I think a ton of people too, they think about that and they're like, cool, this is what we do for our customers.
Yeah.
And so in the credit union, it's like, this is what we do for our members. Like, this is how we treat them. When you start looking at every stakeholder, when you're looking at like partners and everybody else, and you're like, it's out of battery.
You broke it. We broke it.
Anyways.
It's still recording.
Yeah, well, it's still recording, so we just want a video for the second part of it. But anyways, when you start looking at everybody and it's funny, my tone of voice just changed because I'm like, oh, we're not being recorded now.
You're still recorded, buddy.
No, I know. It just feels different. That's funny. But when you're looking at everybody and you're looking at them that way and you're like, hey, how do we make sure that this is like a solid relationship upstream, downstream, every way? It changes everything.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's way more fulfilling. Like it's way better. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a lot more fun that way.
I just feel like if I'm going to give up my time and energy and resources, like that's the most valuable commodity that I have that I can give up is my time and my energy.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to give that up, I better be doing it for something that I can be proud about and stand behind and feel good about, but also that I enjoy and have fun. So that's why like all the people that I've gotten the privilege to hire and asked to come work with me are people I like. And not only are they skilled and talented, but they're like good humans who do good things and are funny and engaging, and I learn from them and I feel better about myself when we're all together, and that's important to me. And so if I'm going to give up, not hanging out with my kids or being home and crossing things off the honey-do list or whatever on the house, like it better be for a good reason. And that's what keeps me there. Like obviously you have to make ends meet, but what stuck out to me about working in the credit union industry, and especially at America First, is they do good things in the community and they mean it. And it's great to be a part of something like that where you can, go to work and do a spreadsheet analysis one day, and then the next day you're doing food pantry packs and you're, going to elementary schools and handing out shoes to kids that you recognize from last year when you were there giving out shoes, and they're wearing the same worn out shoes you gave them last year. And when you see that you're making an impact and a difference, it's pretty easy to like disregard a lot of the warts and the, low lights at work, and kind of refills your cup.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. I want to dig in just a little bit deeper to like some of the specific things that you've done that have kind of drifted from tradition, that have been a little bit different. I'll kind of lead it just a little bit. I was talking with Rex Rollo a couple years ago. He was the previous CFO of America First. And he was talking about clearback during the recession, like 2008, 2009. America First had an excess of funds And every single outlet, everybody that they talked to, all the so-called experts were saying, hey, you need to buy up assets, you need to put this into these secure places and do those kinds of things. And Rex really felt they needed to stay liquid, meaning keeping those funds so that they could do things with them. Coming out of the recession just a couple years later, like into 2010, 2011, there were lots of other credit unions and things that actually needed some help. And then America First was in a position to be able to buy them up. And credit unions have very strict laws where they have to like stay within a certain geographical area or specific things to be able to have members actually become members. And because of that, like you said, now you're in 5 states. A lot of that was because things were being done differently from all different areas of the organization. So what are some things that you think, like you went from, how many did you say partners? Like 9 or?
9 to 52.
Yeah, we're up to 52.
But like, what were some of the things that you were like, this was specific, maybe caused challenges, maybe successes? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of serendipitous that you talk about that. I didn't know that you had kind of had that story because I had just heard yesterday about a small credit union in a rural city, in kind of an outlying state that needed help. And so we actually lent them money, and we did it at a lower interest rate on a loan, but they just needed time. Like they had fixed leadership, and they had actually been subject to like a pretty bad scandal that involved somebody who got fired, and they just needed time. They'd fixed everything. And so the credit union lent them some money, and they paid everything back. They paid early. They're in like good, stable footing. And
nice.
Now this like small community has a really stable credit union there that's from there. And that's important. Like that's good. We didn't use that as an opportunity to like try to poach people or additional members or growth.
Yeah.
I think that's good to have competition. And it's nice that, we work for a place that does that. For me, coming into the space, I had a lot of like imposter syndrome when I first got into it because I just kind of got thrown in and it was kind of like figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I tried my very best to talk to other people in the industry and just say like, what's working for you and what are best practices. Made my way to a couple of sponsorship conferences and things like that. And everyone's there asking the same question, right? Like, how do we know this works?
Yeah.
And took me a couple of years of going to this before I figured out like nobody really knows, and if they did, they would sell it to you in a software package and make a ton of money.
Right.
And so we're all taking the best guesses that we can and trying to figure it out as best we can, but there's ambiguity there regardless. And so after going to that and kind of figuring it out, there were things that I was doing and I would start to get pieces of information back or comments or compliments from people that would just say like, hey, you guys are really doing a good job, or you're changing the game. And when you hear of some of the credit unions ahead of you start noticing what you're doing and they're coming back and saying like, hey, you guys are changing the industry here. Like,
what were some of the things specific that you were doing that, why they were saying that,
So there's no magic metric or measurement that you can go in and say like, how are sponsorships doing? Like you would love ROI, right? Like we do some things with NBA teams and NFL teams, and you have signage up, and you would love to know how many loans that gets you or new accounts. Right. But people don't click on a sign to open a new account. There's really no way to measure that as effectively as you'd like, right? It's not digital advertising with direct attribution and clicks.
Yep.
There's things you can do, but it's still, you're making assumptions. And so we got to a point where it's like, okay, we've got to do something. We've got to figure this out. And eventually, as a team, we just kind of sat down and said, how do we measure this? And the light bulb for me clicked when it's like, why are we trying to do what everybody else is doing when we're not everybody else?
Yeah.
Nor do we want to be. So what works for us? So let's make a list. Let's write down the things that work for us. What are we looking for in a good partner? What in our eyes makes a good partner? And we wrote it down. And I said, okay, prioritize that. What's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Can you give me an example of any one of those?
Yeah,
Maybe
so
it's a little different.
So it'd be like exclusivity. Like, do we care about exclusivity? A lot of times they'll charge you a premium to be the only person in your vertical that can play in this space. And there's times that you want that. You want to stand out. There's other times I don't care because I'm going to do better than the other guy. So I'm not going to pay you a premium. I'm just going to outshine them. I will outwork them. We will outdo everything that they're doing, not because we're trying to beat them, just because I'm that confident in our approach.
Yeah.
We're going to do it differently. We're going to care about you in a way that they don't or can't. So we talk about, does exclusivity matter? And it does. It's in the mix. We talk about other things like how well does that partner do at integrating the things that we care about? So if I come to you and say, hey, I want to put my logo up, but I also want to figure out how to get more cards, how loans, accounts, whatever, do they care about that, or do they just try to treat car dealers, banks, credit unions, soda manufacturers, insurance agencies all the same? So we basically came up with like 10 factors, prioritized them, and then we rank them. So we would act like a teacher giving out grades, and every year during the season, during the year, we would rank them 1 to 10 in each of those factors, and it would spit out a score. And now
were there ones that were hard to kind of quantify?
Yeah, because we're doing everything from aquariums and museums to amusement parks to sports teams. So when you're comparing an NBA team to like a local kids museum,
right,
like how do you do that? But if you can go through and say, well, these guys deliver on this and these guys deliver on these other aspects, now you can at least do scores. And then what you can do is toss it out on a graph and say, okay, scores are on this axis. What I spend with you is on this axis. Where do you rank?
Right. Yeah, because it's probably way different with an NBA team.
But
to
where much is given, much is expected, right? So if I'm giving you a lot of money, I'm expecting your score to be higher.
Yeah,
I'm okay if your score is a little bit lower because I don't pay you as much as a kid's museum or whatever.
But it also makes it apples to apples too, right?
100%.
It's like, okay, the score, you can actually compare.
But now what changes all that is the way you implement it. And so we talk about going from transactional to relationship.
Yeah.
So now what any of these people who, work on our team that go out and manage these relationships, what they're able to do now is completely different because it can be a relationship where they can go in now and say, somebody doesn't say, did I do a good job or not? You can't just say yes or no.
Yeah.
I can literally give them a report card and say, you guys murdered it in 4 out of the 10 areas. But where you're not, what's holding you back is number 2, 5, and 7. Start with number 2 because it's weighted the most. If you can fix this, you will score higher in my book. If you can fix this, you will score higher in my book. Leave everything else alone, fix these things, and you will be fine. Yeah. Or if they can't, right? If there are things that are like, we're not able to fix that, it's like, well, then we're going to have to probably reduce my cost because you can see on the breakdown, you're not outperforming where your expected cost is compared to everybody else that I do business with. Forget the industry and the market and what everyone else is willing to pay you. What I'm willing to pay in the market comparative to all the other partnerships, you're not outperforming the trend line.
Dude, what I love about this, kind of what I'm hearing, is if we're going to be going relationship based, if anybody is doing that, the biggest concern is, okay, well then am I going to be paying for things I maybe shouldn't be because the relationship is more heavily weighted? Right. So if you're going to be doing relationship based, you have to have some sort of mechanism or something where you can clearly put it out and you can give them the opportunity to stay where they're at. And if they can't, then you can reduce it, but it's based on data. It's not based on relationship. So it really shouldn't hurt the relationship if you have that. If you didn't have this other piece, it would make the relationship part hard. So what you're saying, like when you're talking to other credit unions and they're like, well, that sounds great. Like, how do you do it? I feel like that's a big key to how to do it that lots of people don't talk about. It's like, you got to have like the data mechanism and the relationship for that to not hurt the relationship or artificially inflate the relationship just by spend.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit because I'm doubting most people listening to this aren't like credit union sponsorship experts that are like just knee deep in this. Like, yeah give me more. Anybody in any field that you're in, pest control, whatever, tax accountants, whatever you're doing out there, everyone's always like, how do I gauge that line between, I don't want to be best friends with all my customers, right? But I also want to like who I do business with. Yeah. And I want to be able to have honest conversations with people. And that was one of the things that I remember making the jump when I first got assigned to be like a manager or a supervisor. It's all these people that were my friends are now going to work under me in this corporate ladder structure. And I remember somebody saying to me like, are you too close? Are you too close to these people? And my barometer was always, if I am not able to be honest with you, brutally honest with you and tell you what you need to know, then I'm too close. That's how I know. If I'm ever pulling punches, then I need to figure it out. And I've kept that mindset with like all of our partners. If I ever get to a point that I hesitate or I pull a punch, then I need to change something.
Yeah.
But with that being said, like I need to bring in more objective data and not subjective data. So if we can, I never like to negotiate across the table with somebody. I want to be on the same side of the table where we can pull up chairs and look at the problem together.
Right.
From the same side of the table. And it's it sounds brutal, but I always say you got to cut the head off, like meaning it's not the person that you're working with. It's not Dave.
Yeah.
It's the position. It's the owner of the business. Let's take a look at this. In your role, you should care about X, Y, and Z, and we're not doing X and we're not doing Z. Mm-hmm. How do we do that without charging me more money? Mm-hmm. And if you can look at the problem together and you can show them that by fixing this, it's going to make their life better and easier, and I know it's going to make my life easier,
yep,
you're going to be successful no matter what, whether that's pest control or tax accounts or whatever. So that's kind of what we did is like, okay, what do we have that's like data that we can bring in and we can point to?
Yep.
And that's the transaction piece. But then let's like be human. Let's tell these people like, hey, I don't like the way you talk to me when there's an issue, and we've got to fix that.
Right.
But to me, that's been the game changer. And I think that's with everybody. It's like, hey, how do we have a good relationship and treat each other like humans, because that's what we are, and care about each other.
Yeah.
While also being honest about it and being like, okay, how do we make the most of this deal?
So what does that look? That's kind of with corporations. What does that look like when you're dealing with athletes? Like, because you've had the opportunity to like do that, right? It's a little bit different, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. First and foremost, you're typically not working directly with the athlete themselves. You're working with their like agent.
And maybe we should make it clear. I know which athletes you kind of work with, but this is like NBA players, Major League Soccer players.
Yes.
I don't know if you started
players.
working with NFL players.
Yes.
And, yeah.
And the agent's the one that's going to call up the phone and be like, hey, want to do business. For example, right now, we do have a partnership with the local NBA team here, and they're going to do the All-Star game here. And so we're getting athletes that are reaching out to us saying like, hey, I'm coming there for All-Star weekend. Would love to do something with you guys. And well, that's flattering.
Also, I'm not super familiar with that. So people that aren't necessarily in this area because they're coming to this area, their agents will reach out to you.
Yeah. So say there's a former player like for the Utah team or whatever, and he's like, hey, I'm coming back to Utah to be there for All-Star weekend, but I'd like to maybe do something with you while I'm there. We may have not had a relationship with them, and let's be honest, they're trying to make more money. They're retired players, so they don't get the millions of dollars coming in anymore, so they're trying to find like these opportunities, which is great. And there might be things that we could do, right? Like if we had something, we might want to do a player signing, a meet and greet for some of our members or whatever, but how do you stand out in the midst of everything else that's going on there? So you really got to own it. So the agents will call you, they'll talk, and you've really got to be able to cut the head off and say, does this make sense? What are we going to do here? And endorsements are tricky. You're tying yourself to a human. That's different than an organization, right?
Yeah.
Like an organization doesn't get a DUI. Right. An organization typically doesn't make a bad tweet that suddenly reveals awful things about their character.
Right.
Humans do. And you're tied to this person, regardless. Personal life, that's going to bleed over. And so you got to do your due diligence, and then it's a calculated risk, right? Yeah, I feel good. But
what does that even look like, doing due diligence? You're saying that, and I'm nodding my head. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, wait, what does that even look like?
I peek at their Twitter. I peek at their Instagram. I look at Facebook. I try to find their Wikipedia page to see what, weird Little League baseball team they played on. Or I'll ask. I'll say, do you have any references? I'll look at what other businesses they're working with and call those businesses and say, hey, how was your experience with so-and-so? Were they great? Easy to work with or not? Agents that are really good. It's like a job interview is
what it sounds like.
Yeah, and agents that are really good will have that. They'll say, hey, call these people. Here's some references you can look at. We've had the opportunity to work with a lot of emerging ones, so they were just getting started, so there wasn't a lot there.
Yeah.
And then we've had some others that have done some campaigns that I knew and I could go and look at. And then I've told them, we're not signing anything. We'll get 90% of the way there, but we want to meet.
Yeah.
And we'll meet with the athlete, and I trust my gut, and I want to sit across the table from somebody and say, do you have any of these issues? Do we need to be worried? Yeah. Do you understand why we would be worried and how your conduct can affect us? And do you understand who we are and who you're really affecting? It's not just the three of us or four of us in the chairs here. It's
dude, how's that conversation go? I'm sure sometimes
just
it's fine.
Just like that. I don't polish it up.
No, but how do they kind of take it? Are they
Some get it. I will say we had somebody who had sent a picture of themselves in an undressed manner. Is that a good way of putting it? They sent a nudie to a past girlfriend who hung on to it until an opportune time, and then she decided to release it right close to a media day.
Yeah.
And I found out about it through a coworker that like was giggling on the way into work and was like, hey, I bet you saw this. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, man.
So I got to call the team and say like, hey, what are we going to do? And they didn't know about it. So I broke the news to them, and then they had to go in the locker room and be like, what happened? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, that happened. And we had talked to him. His agent was actually his dad. And I remember his dad was like, we'd never do anything like that. And I was like, well, Dad probably was in the room when you sent that picture. So,
Right.
But we've had others that I've just asked, like, do we have to worry about new pictures that you sent back in the day resurfacing? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, like these are the types of questions that we just have to ask. And
have you ever had them be like, well, maybe this or maybe that?
no, I mean, it's fun to watch them sit and like retrospectively, be put on the spot and being like, I got to think about this. But no, most of them, they know, and
Yeah.
we've been burned once or twice, but it's been good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
And there's some, like you guys talk about action sports. There's some of these guys that's part of the persona. They may have plenty of it. They may have done it on purpose because they want to be edgy. And
Yeah.
as a brand, you've got to decide, like, does that work, right? We're pretty conservative. People
Yeah.
don't want to take risks with their money. But if you're, an energy drink company, maybe you're willing to be a little bit more edgy. Maybe bad press is good press. And you're like, hey, can you send out more of those? I don't know. You'd have to make that decision. But
Yeah.
yeah, they're conversations no matter what industry I'm in, I want to have. I want to know what kind of a bridge I'm going to cross.
Yeah. I think that's really cool too, because it's like, I am a very emotional type person. So like if I saw like one of my idols like Travis Pastrana, I'd do everything Travis, what's up?
Yeah,
and like, I'd want to just like.
So I'll tell you this. Before it had anything to do with the role that I'm in now, but when I met a few athletes, whether that was just at like a junior jazz signing or whatever, I came across. I remember going to a Walmart. It was literally the day I went to propose to my now wife. I was going down to buy the ring, and my buddy called and said, "Hey, Carlos Boozer, who was like an all-star basketball player, is at Walmart, like at our local Walmart, doing some." And I was like, "What?" Yeah. So I was passing it, so I hurried and turned in, got out, I'm walking through the parking lot trying to figure it out, and I ended up like bumping into this guy, and I look up and it's him. And I got starstruck. And my weird thing that I would always go towards, and you talk about concerts, I went to a lot of concerts, and I have a friend that for some reason like always meets the band. I've met these like lead singers of my favorite bands, and I panic, and I always tell them who they are. And then I freak out and I just like lose it. So I told him like, you're Carlos Boozer. And he's like, yeah. And then there was this long, awkward pause and me just staring deeply into his eyes. And then he was like, all right, man. He just left. And I was like, oh, I've done that like countless times. At a certain point, you just start to realize like these guys are guys. Like,
yeah, they're just
people. And I've gotten past the point of telling people like who they are and then just freezing.
Right.
And no, I've had great conversations with some of these guys, and it's interesting to hear them talk. And I like you've had experience living in Georgia and Louisiana and all these other places. I always like to know, like, as a homegrown Utahn,
yeah,
I know we're quirky, right? Like, let's not be naive. Like, we get it. We have weird fry sauce and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, what's weird about Utah? Like, what's your experience been like? And I always like to get this outside perspective and.
Yeah.
What surprised you the most? What do you like? What don't you like? So,
yeah,
they're people. So,
and I think they also want to be treated like people too, right? It's funny because you're like, wouldn't it be cool to have like a little bit of a relationship with these guys? And I think they would probably rather have like a normal relationship rather than like some fanboy. Like,
I think you would hope so.
Yeah, but it's still hard because it's like you guys are very controlled emotionally and can
I mean, my child would differ with you when you say that, but no, I understand it, right? There's some people
like it's a skill set that you have. You know what I mean?
Do you think ones that don't, do they have like a big ego? Is that kind of way they
probably,
don't? Is
I would
that
assume. I don't. My degree is not in psychology, so I'm not going to pretend to like read their behavior and.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, like, one of my favorite bands growing up was Starting. It's a band called The Starting Line.
Starting Line. I
love them. They're from Pennsylvania. Great. They've broken up, gotten back together. Things are great. But I've met the lead singer a handful of times, and I still freak out every time. And I know that I don't know if he has like a huge following, but I would assume that it's probably his Instagram and things are lower than an NBA player that I probably met.
Yeah.
But from what it meant to me and like growing up listening to the music and his voice resonating, like I freaked out. I still would probably have butterflies talking to him way more than any of the like athletes that I work with because it just resonates, and that's But yeah, they're just people, and most time they don't care about that kind of stuff. There's times I'm sure they like the attention, but I also think that wears off pretty quick. And the ones we've worked with that have been in whatever league a little bit longer, usually that's like all worn off, and they're just people. Like honestly, I would tell you one of the nicest people I've ever met, and we're not like homeboys or anything like that. Like we don't hang out or anything, but every time I got to meet him, I had my daughter with me a couple of times, and he, whether he did or not, and he might have just trick of the trade, but he would tell her like, I remember you when I met you last time. And that like stayed with her was Kyle Beckerman, who was a soccer player. Yeah. And like he is still like a hallowed name in our household because the way he treated my daughter like won my heart over, and he was just the nicest person.
Yeah, that's cool.
So when they can show that side of them and actually just be people, that resonates with me. And I was always like, how do we communicate that out to the community? Because that was awesome.
Do you remember who the first athlete is who you met with?
Professionally, like in my role?
Yeah.
Like we did some stuff with, I think the first one that like I really ever did anything with was Trey Burke, who was a point guard. Yeah. And he had just come off of being college player of the year at Michigan. Hit some big shots, and so we did some stuff with him.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Was it kind of, I mean, I think we've kind of covered what that was like, but was it, you're just like, okay, cool. Like just.
Yeah, no, I did not tell him who he was. I was a lot cooler about stuff, but yeah, it was just a good opportunity. And again, like he was a rookie coming into the league, and so it was nice, you know, being able to have somebody who I don't think had like a lot of like persona coming in, and he just wanted to make a difference here locally. And we've done some other stuff with some other soccer players who have been super fantastic, and it's been great. Like, been super fortunate that way.
Cool. Yeah, you've been in tons of situations that I think lots of people don't have an opportunity to be in. Have you ever found yourself in one and you're like, whoa, this is rad? Like, because I think sometimes you kind of go through the motions and afterwards you're like, oh, wow, like that was kind of, but have you ever been in the moment and you're like, this is.
Yeah. A goal of mine has always been don't ever take this for granted. Anything. And I don't think you have to be in a role like mine. I think that's anything in life, right? Like you have to understand that there's going to be sweet moments that come by and you got to stop and enjoy it. Otherwise, like, what are you doing? Yeah. And yeah, there's been a couple of times where, you know, we've been touring Allegiant Stadium and you're like literally on the field where all these NFL athletes play, doing a tour, and it's just like, what is this? You know, you have to kind of stop and take a picture. And yeah, I've been able to go on a couple of different things and see some different big games and stuff like that. And it's nice. You have to kind of stop and be like, this is cool. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you just sent me a photo the other day. You were on Allegiant on the field. U of U was playing, and I was like, I'm watching the game, and you're like, so am I. You sent me a picture. I'm like, oh, you're like in the game.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah, and my close friends. So I don't put any of that stuff on like social media at all because it's not.
Well, I think I even prompted it, right?
Sure.
I said something and then you sent it. It's not like you're just shooting it out like, hey, look where I'm at.
Because it's not about me, right? Like I didn't buy the tickets. I'm there for work, and so I understand that like somebody else's like hard-earned funds are funding me being here, and there's a job to do. Yeah. And it's funny, like all my friends are like, man, got to be friends with Greenwell because I get to go to like cool places and do cool stuff. But now all of them are like, yeah, like it's fun to go with you, but all you do is like talk and visit with these guys, man. Like you don't even watch the game half the time. Or if you look at like I tell people when they come work in our area, like this will ruin you. And if you look at my phone, half of it is of my family and my daughter playing soccer or my son doing funny baby things or whatever. Yeah. And the rest of it's like timeout promotions, signs at stadiums. It just ruins you. Like you start watching games in weird ways. Like half time I pay attention to commercials more than I do the actual game. Right. And I'm trying to figure out like what are these other brands doing so I can learn from them or learn what not to do. Yeah. So yeah, I'll go to these big things, and sometimes you have to kind of remind yourself like it's okay to watch the game and enjoy it and be a fan for a second. But when you see how the sausage is made, sometimes like you don't enjoy the game as much because you know the backstory, and people who are fan favorites maybe aren't great to work with behind the scenes, or vice versa. You know, guys who aren't the most talented player
Yeah.
you're rooting for because they're just the nicest people, and that complicates things.
Yeah. Cool. You've worked with a ton of people that have done things a little bit different. That's how most sports athletes that really achieve something, they do something a little different. What do you feel like you've done that has drifted from tradition?
Oof. I mean, obviously, we've kind of talked about it. I think just in my role, this isn't how I saw my career going. This isn't like what I woke up one day and was like, I remember I was supposed to go to Oregon State, and I was going to try to do some sort of like Nike internship and work for Nike, and I talked to people. I didn't do that. I went to Weber State and then working for a financial institution. But it's funny, like you say, I think when you can follow your passions and what you're good at, then I think opportunities open up. So I think that's been part of it, is just opening this whole new world that like we really weren't in at where I work. I didn't have to go somewhere else. I was able just to kind of create that. And that's not, everyone's not going to be able to do that. And then it's just within that field, trying to be a game changer, right? Like, I don't want to just be the guy that flies under the radar and settles for everything. So when I go to these conferences, I'm not trying to seek out the limelight. I'm not trying to be the loudest voice in the room. I'm trying to find the smartest people in the room that often sit in the back corners and are really quiet, and pick their brain and just learn and reinvent and be different. And I think if you ever get complacent and think that like what worked for you yesterday is going to work for you tomorrow, you're crazy. Yeah. And you'll probably be unemployed soon. And so I just always want to be a difference maker and try to find ways to do things that make a difference, but like impactful things, right? Like, how do I make the community better? Yeah. I think it's great that we met this NBA player. What are we going to do? Can we use his influence and platform to bring attention to charity and go help them? Like, let's do that.
Yeah, well, one thing too is like you've stuck with America First too. Like, they've provided you opportunity. So like, is there a category at America First that's like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, like that people have been there? Or is there like, so when everyone walks in, oh, there's Brett because he's been there longer than all of us type of thing?
It's so funny you say that. So you'd think so. I've been there 18 years, which is like pretty unique. And I will say, for a young person like myself to be there for 18 years, I am still one of the like young bucks there for sure. There are people who have been there for 25, 30, 35, 40 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We promote from within. So like, and with that, you would think maybe like, okay, they just promote tenure and it gets complacent and there's not a lot of innovation. But I think there's pressure on you to, at any time they could hire someone from the outside, but they've chosen to take a risk and just keep it in-house and go with you. So at least in my instance, I always felt pressure like, I've got to reinvent myself. I've got to be better. And that's when that imposter syndrome kicked in, and I just felt like I've got to outpace everybody else. And then at some point, somebody makes a comment or a compliment or something that kind of like resonates and backs up the fact that like, oh, I am okay at this.
Yeah.
And, it's funny, I'm talking to you here today trying to talk about all this stuff. I still feel like there's so much I can learn. And I still feel like I've just scratched the surface of trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, pushing as hard as you have puts you in obviously unique and incredible situations. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable and hard situations. Have some of the things you've done kind of, like you're saying, lots of times all we hear is kind of the Instagram post version, right?
Yep.
Like, what are some of the things that you don't normally talk about? Some of the complications or difficult things.
These big events, there's a lot of work that goes into carrying them out and having them work. And so there's long hours. And so my job is not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. There are a lot of evening things that I have to go to. And it sounds great to go to all these events. It sounds fun. But I also like my kids and I like my family. And I would like to go watch my daughter play soccer. And I would like to, go on a date night with my wife that's not having her come with me to a college basketball game or something. So yeah, there's complications with that. But then also we work in a very competitive industry, and despite however I want to do business and be classy or be nice about it, not everyone abides by those same tactics. And we have people that try to, buy partners out from us. We've had deals that we've signed that competitors have gone in after the fact and tried to pay them more money to basically kick us out and avoid a contract, and it's worked a time or two. And I don't I don't abide by that. Like, I don't think that that's the right way to do it, but I don't control other people's actions either. So
Yeah.
it's, you know, some people call it naive or thinking, you know, altruistically or whatever, but I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to have to stoop to a certain level that I'm not proud of to get a job done.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I've had opportunities and experiences, I guess I call them opportunities, where things like that have happened too, and it's like, all right, now I know how not to do that.
Yeah, and you know, the people, like I talk about, people that have done that to me, it probably has the potential to leave a really sour taste in my mouth about that company, just because that one person's done a certain thing.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, like, that company is made up of a lot of people, and there's probably a lot of great people that work there. I know a lot of great people that work at that competitor, and some of them are really great friends. And I just have to understand that it's not that company, it's those people, the way that they operate.
Yeah.
I don't agree with.
Right.
But that's kept me from working there. Like, there was an opportunity to go and work there, and I was like, I don't want to. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm not going there.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about personal life, like going and doing that. You're in a unique situation where your wife works where you work.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So how do you balance that, like personal?
Oof, I don't know that we do. Good counseling? No. We met there. We're one of those couples, and so we don't really know any different.
Yeah.
And I'm a very transparent person. I try to compartmentalize as best I can, but who you see here is the same guy that you're going to see in any other scenario, whether it's a soccer game sideline or in my office or whatever. So we just treat it that way. We don't bring stuff to work and like let everybody else get into our personal life, but we also don't hide from that either. And so she's great. I'd give my wife way more credit than me. Like, I think she's done an amazing job of not letting that get weird or complicated. Mm-hmm. We go to staff meetings and sit across the table from each other. Like, we don't sit next to each other. We don't even go to lunch that often together. And we're just busy. We both have stuff, but, you know, we'll swing by each other's offices and say hi. And we've kept it professional, but, you know, we've had personal scenarios. Like our little guy that we just had, he's going to turn 2. He was born at 27 weeks. And so we ended up being in the NICU for 96 days. And we had a lot of ups and downs. And work was amazing to work with us. And people knew about it. And we're not going to hide it and try to come to work and not tell people what was going on. And so you get vulnerable sometimes. And we get teary-eyed about some things. And it'd be hard to leave the NICU and the doctor's telling you all these awful things that could potentially happen, and you've got to. And it was during COVID, so we couldn't be in there at the same time. So I'd high five her, and she'd go in, and I'd go to work, and you know, you got a job to do, so I'd have to look at spreadsheets of budgets and things and approve them while you're thinking about those other things, and I think letting people in and just being real about it, like, yeah, it stinks, and I don't want that to happen, but I also have to get these things done. So, like, let's just do it and help me out with it.
Yeah.
And I think people watching us go through that, I think, understand now. And they were nice enough to, like, probably lend us some grace when I don't know that we deserved it, but we appreciated it. Mm-hmm. But I think they also have been closer and kind of realized what we've done. So,
yeah. Yeah, that was a scary time. I'm glad he's doing well now. But,
yeah.
Man, that was, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Heart goes out to anybody who has to go through that kind of stuff. It's not great.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, I think everybody goes through stuff for a reason. And I'm very, very careful about the trials and tribulations that I wish upon myself, because I know I'm going to have to go through that to grow. Yeah. And we did. We grew, and we're lucky to be where we're at on the other side of it. And I know not everybody is in that same space, but I'm grateful for our scenario. Even though we had to go through a tough time, he's doing good. So we'll take it.
As we're in this kind of sentimental thinking about our children and that kind of stuff, if you had one piece of advice, like, I know we're talking a lot about business stuff, but like for your kids, if you're like, they're going to hear this at some point, what advice would you give them?
Besides, like, pick a better dad?
Yeah, besides that.
Okay.
No, but like, let's get rid of like, what is most important kind of to you in life?
Yeah.
And then like, what would you say like to your kids at some future date if they listen to this, like, and say when they're your age or just going, like when you were starting America First?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Think about maybe that when they're like 20.
So we're in that space with like comp soccer right now. My daughter plays competitive soccer, which parents are comp soccer, any comp, anything. Parents are crazy. And I can't believe I'm like in that world, but it's fine.
Well, my daughter's in dance, so
yeah, dance, gymnastics, cheerleading, like all the things,
Yeah.
man. Like you parents are crazy, but there's some good ones out there, and I get it, and you do it because you love your kids and whatever.
Yeah.
Our coach recently just had like a sit down with the parents, and they want to talk about like, hey, how's your kid progressing, and what are some things we can do. And I would say the same thing. I did say the same thing to my daughter as we were driving there. I was like, so what are you good at? Like, what are some of the things that you like about soccer? What are some of the things that you want to do better? Mm-hmm. And, you know, she would ask me like, what do you think, Dad? I don't know. And I just told her, look, I want you to learn how to be a good person. And I want you to learn how to win and be a good sport about it. I want you to learn how to lose and be a good sport about it. I want you to learn how to do hard things and how to have to like better yourself. And I want you to learn how it feels to have people rely on you and succeed and be a good teammate and let them down and have them be able to show you grace and say that that's okay. Yeah. So we're going to watch you fail. We're going to watch you succeed, and you're going to grow, and that's okay. And that's what I would tell them is like, life's not linear, and it has a lot of ups and downs. And the same time that you're texting your friend about being at, you know, a Pac-12 championship game and how cool that is, at the same time, you're, you know, going through awful things at home, like a kid in a NICU or whatever. And that's life, and it's messy, and it's weird, and you got to get your way through it. And that's what life is about. That's what matters. And so show people a little bit of humility and give people some space to breathe. And it's okay to give the benefit of the doubt and just become a better person. And that's what I would share with them. That's what I hope, that they're a better person than I am, that they know how to work hard, that they know how to do hard things and not give up and quit when life gets a little bit difficult. Mm-hmm. And just enjoy the journey, because you never know when it's going to be over. Like, yeah. So don't put off the vacation. Don't put off having fun. Like, have fun at work. Do hard things and enjoy it while you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. That's what life's about.
Yeah.
We covered a lot there. That's awesome. I have a couple other questions for you. Oh, we kind of talk about like things that we've done a little bit different. I have a question for you. So who's somebody that you don't know? Like we've talked about a bunch of people that you do know. Yeah. Somebody you don't know that you feel like is drifting from tradition. If you could get together with them, like just have a sit down, whether that's go sit by them at a game, go skiing with them, even just sit down for a meal, whatever. Yeah. Who would that be and why?
All right, I'm going to go crazy and do two answers. One, just working with you guys and like learning more about Harry Vardon, and like it's been super interesting. And so I've like dug into that a little bit, and I would love to like not just have to dig through history books, to be able to sit down and actually ask the man some questions about, you know, some of the things that he's done. Alive though, one of the great philosophers of our time, Rob Dyrdek, who okay, he's probably not a great philosopher, but I love Rob. Like,
oh man, Rob and Big.
Yeah,
and,
so being like a knucklehead, in between watching episodes of Jackass on MTV and trying to recreate it with my friends on the Hi8 video camera, like this show showed up of Rob and Big, and it was like this guy who was friends with like his security guard. He was a skateboarder and he did stuff with DC shoes, and it was like he was funny. Mm-hmm. And then Fantasy Factory came out, and I was like, this is what I want my life to be. I want to work in a fantasy factory where I can buy the tennis ball gun machine from American Gladiators and shoot my coworkers and be okay with that. Totally. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do. But just like following him and listening to his business sense, and he has a podcast, and he gets very deep about a lot of things, and he's very structured. He cares about like how much sleep he gets, and he cares about the activities that he does, and he gets that. And that's what I talked about before, right? Like the best thing that I have to offer the world is my time and my energy, and those resources should be cared for. And he's very, very like particular about what he does and what he uses that energy on. And I could be way more disciplined in my life about that. But just understanding all the things he's gone through in the business. And I mean, I don't think MTV is MTV anymore. I think it just plays ridiculousn's. That's all that's on.
Totally.
And the deal he was able to work out, and, you know, trying to figure out like all the royalties and the way that came in and his income streams, like he's a smart guy that probably hasn't been given the credit that he deserves until maybe now. I don't know. I think more people are now doing it, but he's a very interesting guy.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll try to get this in his hands so then maybe we can figure something out. It'd be rad.
That'd be really cool.
Cool. Okay, another different type, well, not different question. Same question, but somebody you do know.
Yeah. So with my role, we talked a lot about the corporate partnership side, but one of the roles I also got was working with all of our dealer relations managers. So our bread and butter is auto lending. So we do a lot of like lending to autos, cars, RVs. And I work with all of the reps that go out and visit all those different dealers, and they establish the relationships and do good things. So I've had to like learn that world, and it's been great. And I think car dealers sometimes get a bad rap for, being like, they use the term used car salesman, and like that's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these guys do a lot of great things and are very invested in the community. And there's some great ones in like the Las Vegas market that do awesome things, great ones here. But one of them that I actually just got to go to a charity dinner the other night and sit next to him is Oliver Young with the Young Automotive Group. He started a charity, and I don't know if it was Oliver per se himself, but he's super invested in a lot of boards in the community. But he also helped start this charity, this foundation with the Young Group called Young Caring for Our Young. And they do awesome things like the Kind Fund, where if you're a teacher and you notice a student is struggling, you can apply to this program, and they will get you a gift card, and you provide the sizing for the kids, and a shopper will go out and spend the $150 or whatever on the gift card and buy items and then bring them to your school, and you can give them to the kid. And so he's not worried about necessarily selling cars and RVs, although that's their business.
Yeah.
But he really, really cares about helping kids in our community, especially Davis County. And
that's cool.
How do you not like love somebody that can do that? And
totally.
Getting to know him better and sitting at the charity dinner, and he's very goal oriented. I've actually gone to like 3 of his trainings now that he does at the beginning of the year and talks about the goals that he sets. And I tease him because he gets very emotional and cries every time he talks about his kids. But that's what I love, is that he's very like human.
Yeah.
I think he's very different than what most people would expect like a quote unquote car salesman to be. Yeah. But I feel better about myself every time I'm with him. And to me, that shows like the mark of a true great human.
Yeah, that's rad. Cool. Well, sweet. And he's here local, so we'll try to reach out to him.
Here local, he climbs mountains, man. He's like right up your guys' alley. Like
he sounds like somebody I want to get to know, not just for the podcast, but somebody.
He's one of those that would slip into the base jumping way before I would. But Oliver's a good guy.
Okay, Oliver, if you're hearing this, let's get together and do something fun. It'd be good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, awesome. I feel like we spent quite a bit of time. We're just getting this kind of figured out, this whole podcasting stuff. What we're always going to try to do is we're going to try to identify people that we feel like are really pushing life to the fullest. And Greenwell, you're doing that, man. Like, I love it. I love to be surrounded by people that are doing that. And yeah, it's inspiring. It's what life is about. What you kind of mentioned about for your kids, like that's what I want for my kids. I want them to know that it's okay to fail, that it's part of success. It's not the opposite. But that's everybody that comes and works with us. We're building a community right now, the Varden community, that we feel like it's people that are pushing for that. Whether they decide to get some Varden goods or not, like we're trying to gather people. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world a little bit and even just around the U.S. And it's interesting when you meet different people and you're like, you get it. Like it's people that they're working hard, they're playing hard, and they're over-delivering. Like they're like trying to push and do the most out of life. And that's what we're trying to build here. That's why we have the whole podcast, is to really bring people like that together. And so I appreciate you being our first guest.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for putting up with a lame-o like me. I'm sitting with guys that like,
yeah, whatever.
Snowboard, skiboard. I got Wayman that's got like the logo scar on his face right now that he's healing up from like wicked snowmobile trip.
It's my branding. It's the Varden Lightning Bolt brand.
That's right.
Now, like, are you into Yellowstone? Do you watch Yellowstone?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's basically it's the Varden.
He's got the brand. Yeah,
so
he's
like,
good.
I'm the Rip of Varden, essentially.
He's the heartthrob, man. He's the heartthrob.
So
no, thanks for letting me be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
any final words?
No, let's just pray for more snow so we can have lots of water, but then get ready for golf season.
Yeah, pray for snow so that it keeps the grass green on the golf courses.
That's right, and the lake's full.
Lake's full.
Yes. All of the things. And let's hope for a quick
Speaking of lakes
transition
full,
between
we're
the
going to
two.
need a few seasons like this to really fill up the lakes again.
Yeah.
Powell and
Yeah.
other lakes. But yeah,
We'll get there.
we'll get there. It's such a good season.
Yeah.
Like just going up over into the valley and the snowbanks are like taller than the car.
Oh, that's
It's like it's been so long since it's been like that.
yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. Well, a couple commitments from us. We're going to try to reach out to Rob Deerdick and to Oliver Young.
And Little Texas.
And
Shout
Little
out to Little
Texas.
Texas.
All right.
Yes. Okay, those three. That's why we're going over it. We're going to do that, and we will we'll report on that in a future podcast.
Love it.
All three of those. Okay. Awesome. Till next time.
Yeah.